It is patron and longtime listener, Adie MacKenzie. And I'm so glad to be one-on-one with you today.
Oh, I'm honored and delighted.
So, what is your question?
So, my question is basically I have quite a few bottles because I love wine access so much and I tend to take advantage of great deals that come up. And so I've probably got 50, 60 bottles of wine, and I
Mhm.
don't have a wine fridge. I have a nice big rack and I keep it in my basement garage, which is pretty cool most of the time. I if it ever gets hot, I blow air on it with a fan.
Okay.
I keep it covered with a dark sheet so it's not getting like light strike.
Okay.
And I have a few bottles of white and rosé in a regular extra fridge that I have downstairs. But I wonder if I'm damaging my wines.
Okay. So, we'll start with the white and the rosé, which I think that you're doing a good job of. You definitely want to keep those cooler. And if you have the storage for a fridge, that's good. Now, let's think about cellars, cellar temperature, yada, yada, yada. So, what we're talking about is something that is consistent, right? It can't be too hot, but it doesn't have to be freezing cold either. So if you have a fridge, you'll keep it at like what used to be cellar temperature, which would be 55 most of the time. If you have one zone, if you have multiple zones, you can mess around with it. But really, we're talking about like 45 for whites and or 50, 50, 55 is probably, or to 60 is probably good cellar temperature. So with the whites, I think that it is better to keep them cool than to keep them hot. And I like the idea of a fridge. What I think is that perhaps you want to put your reds in that fridge also if you have room,
Mm.
because what I'm concerned about is that you are in the south-ish, we'll call it the south-ish, right? So you're in Tennessee. And even on cool summer days, it still gets hot. Now, what I'm not worried about is the humidity, but I am worried about the heat and I'm worried about the fluctuation. So I would rather have you, frankly, get a bunch of storage boxes for under bed storage boxes and have you put them underneath a bed or have you put them in a closet, then have you put them in the basement where there can be fluctuations, especially in the summertime. We worry a little bit less about the cold because very unlikely that wine is going to be damaged by extreme cold. It can
Mm.
be, but people even freeze wine sometimes. I don't advise it, but people do it as a storage mechanism. That's not the issue. The issue is really heat because that's when things start to come apart. In fact, we just brought a bottle of wine home from Portugal and we had mistakenly left one of the bottles in the car and it's horrible. It's
Mm.
absolutely horrible. It tastes cooked. So
Yeah.
what the last thing we want to do is take these nice bottles of wine and have fluctuation and then open them and have them be ruined.
Yeah.
So my recommendation, just because I know where you live and I know it is an inconsistent temperature because it's similar to where I live,
Yeah.
is to get them out of that area and put them in some sort of storage, whether it be the back of a closet, under a bed, in a guest room, somewhere where they can be hidden away. That's totally fine. Nobody's asking you to get like a big giant wine fridge. You don't have to make that kind of investment. And I want to be clear about that because I do, right? I do because I have a lot of wine. Um, and you can even get a relatively cheap wine fridge if you would like. But
Okay.
I think that if you're not ready to do that, or if your financial situation does not permit, I'm not saying you in particular, but anybody listening to
Gotcha.
this,
Yeah.
it is absolutely fine to put it somewhere where it is dark, the temperature is relatively consistent, and there's some humidity in the air. You don't want to be in, you got to have a little bit of humidity. Anywhere humans are breathing is a place
Yeah.
with some humidity. So does that sound like something that you can do?
Well, I'm thinking that I'm going to have to get my husband on board because the room that would be likely to be that cooler, darker room is the room where the guitars are stored. And perhaps there's a little space there that I could have to move my wine rack.
If you can't, though, again, like I said, you can get creative. A closet. I know many a person who has a small New York apartment who either stores their stuff in the back of a closet or underneath the bed. So even if you have a guest room, for instance, and you want to get underbed storage boxes and put them under there, I mean, that's not a bad option either. It's better, I think, than what you're doing now, where I'm just getting a little worried because, especially with these hot days,
Yeah.
the cool air is not going to be enough. The bottles are going to get warm, and I'm just worried that that heat is going to start disintegrating the wine. And the more fluctuation you have, the worse it is. The other issue, which may or may not be a problem, and I don't know, is vibration. So if it's on that ground level and you've got cars going by, who knows? I don't know. Or if they're doing any road work, like, I don't know. I know sometimes, they're out in the street and like the Raleigh people are doing crazy stuff and the house is shaking a little bit. And I would worry about that. But anyway, I'm less concerned about that and more worried about the heat fluctuation. So I think, again, no worries about where you store it. It's just a question of the temperature in your particular case. And I do also want to emphasize, like, you're not concerned about humidity. There's some people who don't pay attention to that element. And that's important too. So you do have to make sure there's some, like, if it's a room no one ever goes into, sometimes it can get a little bit dry.
Yeah.
You don't want that either.
Yeah.
And for the guitar room, that's another thing. They don't want humidity, right? Isn't that?
You want a certain amount of humidity around the guitars, but you don't want it super humid. Then that is bad for the wood.
And you don't need it super humid for the wine either. We don't want it super humid, although humidity is better than dryness for wine.
Gotcha.
Because think about the cork. We got to keep that cork moist, and we've got to keep the cells open. Yeah. If you contract it and there's no moisture in the air, now you're going to get leakage. You're going to get all of those issues, and then cork taint and all the terrible things that we don't. Yeah.
Well, so far I've been pretty lucky. It's not like I'm trying to age my wines. I'm just drinking them. But I will definitely pay attention to that. That's really helpful.
Good. Well, I think there's that. And I think that for everyday wines, if you're going through them more quickly, then your solution is not the end of the world. But if you do have one or two nice bottles, and I know that occasionally you do invest in some of those nice bottles, take care of them. And I would, like I said, rather see you put those in the fridge along with the whites and rosés and just store them there and warm them up, of course, before you drink them. But I'd rather see you put those in there, honestly. If you've got some room, just put those nice bottles in there until you figure out what you're going to do with the rest of the stuff, until you negotiate the guitar wine room, right? And if you have all these guitars, don't you think you should be able to have your wine in there too? I mean,
I think so. I think I can gain some purchase there.
I like it. Plus, they look good. Guitars and wine together, right?
Indeed.
All right. Well, this was a really, really helpful question. It was a great one. I think it's going to help a lot of people in the community. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your question with the community. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you as a patron. You're so great. You're always asking such great questions. So I don't think this will be our last one. Do you, Adie?
No. I look forward to asking more questions. I've constantly got them coming up.
Good. We will catch you next time.
Thank you.